to 7 members of staff. That's the largest it got. With that came a lot of stress, some that aren't good. You've got to remember that you've got people out on their own in vans, and you quickly find out that not everybody is trustworthy. Domestic is great for getting money in. The downside of domestic is there's a ceiling of what to charge, and you see people come into the industry 6 months later, they're either out of business or they don't have any work. Try to get into commercial with small equipment, and then they drop someone in the lurch halfway through the year.
What about you? And welcome to the Roots to Revenue podcast. This is the podcast that helps small businesses grow. Today's podcast is going to focus on taking a big business down to a smaller business. Usually we talk about how to grow a business. Today we're going to talk about downsizing. Before we get into that, let me tell you a bit about today's sponsor. Podcast is sponsored by Jobber. Jobber's easy for me to recommend as I've used it for the last 10 years to run my own business. Not only does it do all my scheduling, my invoicing, my quoting, it also gets me paid faster and my customers love it.
Hi, I'm Jason, and in today's podcast we have Scott from SE Landscapes. Do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
I'm Scott. I'm from the northeast of England, and I now run a small landscaping / grounds maintenance business, which has been going now for 17 years, and I'm currently in the process of downsizing the business.
Scott, you also run a YouTube channel, but we're going to talk more about that later. Do you want to tell me just a little bit about how you got into doing what you're doing now?
Yeah.
What was your story?
My story is I left school, I went and did an apprenticeship. I went and did a course at college in computers, and while all my friends were making money, I wasn't. So I decided that I would go and find an apprenticeship, and a local landscaping company at the time was advertising for apprentices, and I quickly jumped on board, and I was getting £70 a week, which was a lot better than £0 on the college course. Everybody may have thought that it wasn't the ideal course. It wasn't an academic trade to be going into or anything, but the company I went and did the apprenticeship for, I quickly fast-tracked once I'd finished my NVQ. I quickly fast-tracked through the business, and 11 years later, after being a team leader, I was a contract supervisor, and I was managing multiple sites, multiple numbers of staff and multiple jobs, running up to 15 guys at one stage on various jobs. So it got to the point where I wasn't working as much, which by that point I really loved what we did. I really loved the business. I didn't really like the paperwork side of things. That was sort of what happened 2 years into the contract supervisor's job. Was there was a huge downturn and the company went out of business. And that is when SE Landscaping was formed.
And so you decided to start work for yourself. Were you already doing work on the side, or did you take your redundancy or whatever and put it into the new business, or how did you start? Where did you get the funds for the new business?
Yeah, basically what happened was I was entitled to 11 years redundancy, and you don't get that for sort of 3 months, but you already know from the liquidators tell you roughly what you're going to get, and I was entitled to £12,000. So I knew that money was coming. It was 2 weeks before Christmas when the company shut down. They'd set up a side business of building houses. There was a big economic crash, and they owed the bank £5 million. So I spoke to a lot of the customers that I had a week before Christmas, because we also had a baby on the way. And some of them said that they would take me on and give me work. I had a client base and I had customers who knew me. So basically I had to go away over Christmas, I had to get insurance, I had to get a vehicle, and I did have a few bits and pieces of equipment because I used to do a few jobs on the side after work and on a weekend. So I had the basic bits of kit to set away to do planting jobs and to do small commercial contracts, nothing big because I didn't have any big equipment. After Christmas, I went back. I had a bit of luck in the business because my dad was a health and safety officer for 20 years. Some of the customers I was working for were Balfour Beatty Civil Engineering, for instance. I was working on a large planting job, and there was £200,000 worth of planting left to do, and that was the first job that landed on my lap. Now,
a nice little number. A nice little number to start with.
It was daunting, yes, and it dropped on my lap. There was various issues to go with it. Was one, the only reason they gave me the job, they only usually work with large companies. The only reason they gave me the job was the quantity surveyor knew me, and he went to the people above him and said, "Look, I can vouch for this guy," and they fast tracked me through. So that was a bit of a start.
You need to bring your own staff right from the word go, or did you do that
No,
off your own bat?
It was a matter I didn't have any money.
Yep.
So it was a matter of I need to go out and start working 14, 15 hours a day. There was one major stumbling block was in order to complete this job, I needed £30,000 worth of plants, which I didn't have. Nobody will bankroll you. You're a new business. You won't get credit from the company for plants. So I had to borrow originally from my dad. And then once you start...
Do you mind me asking how much money your dad helped you with, or a ballpark figure?
Yeah, initially he gave me £5,000. And then what happened was I went to the company with £5,000. They gave me the plants. And after a month or so, because they knew me as well through orders, he was happy to say, "Look, we'll help you get the business off the ground." So there was a lot of goodwill in the early days that I'm not saying everybody would get. It's sort of, I was lucky.
Yeah, but that was built up from a.
But that was built up with relationships and people knowing me and
Right,
thinking
so they already trusted you.
Yeah,
sort of thing,
yeah. So, but it could have gone the other way, and I could have done that first job, and it could have been a struggle, and I could have gone out of business as businesses do.
What size did you get the business to, or how long? What size did you get the business to, Scott?
It took 10 years to build the business up to. At one point, I was up to 7 members of staff. That's the largest it got. With that came a lot of stress. It was trying to manage 7 members of staff, some that aren't good. You've got to remember that you've got people out on their own in vans, and you quickly find out that not everybody is trustworthy, and some people will sit for 2 hours somewhere and not do a day's work, and not realise that some sites have CCTV, and you will get a quantity surveyor or a site manager ringing up and saying, "You guys never moved since you arrived on Monday morning, and it's 11 o'clock and he's never moved." And you quickly realise that when you ring them up or when you speak to them on the night, that people will blatantly lie to you and say that they've done a full day's shift. The stress of managing staff.
Getting the work in, that it becomes less of a... I enjoy working on the tools myself, and whenever you're up to 7 staff, did you have somebody in the office full time, or was that a role that you were doing?
Pretty much, apart from the health and safety, which my dad managed, I was office staff. I was invoicing on a Sunday night. I was doing quotations through the day. I would go out and take an hour out of my day and go and do a quotation. I would get home on a night, I would send that quotation. I would manage supplies, everything.
Were you using any software to manage your business?
Nothing. It's something...
Even for your accounts? Or
everything has always been manual, and even to this day, I still do my invoices on a manual basis, which I know everybody's in the new world. And it's something that I've just stuck by, a system that works. Everybody's very mobile phone orientated now with things. I still have a desk diary, and I still use the diary. And it's just the way that you get stuck in a rut. I think it might not be the best way, but it's just the way.
If it works for you,
if
don't.
It works,
If it works, and don't why add to your hassles?
Yeah.
And what do you think? The difference is you do mostly commercial now. What do you think the pros and cons of domestic / commercial is?
Domestic is great for getting money in. The downside of domestic is there's a ceiling of what to charge, and you see people come into the industry and they cut a few lawns for £30-40, and then they try to double the figures, and 6 months later they're either out of business or they don't have any work. See, that's so often on YouTube, on Facebook, people just trying to charge too much to the average man and woman who possibly just have a £20,000 a year job. They haven't got £700 or £800 laying about to get a hedge cut.
Yeah.
Yet someone thinks it's okay to go and charge them £700 or £800 for 3 or 4 hours work. So that's the downside, that there's only so much you can charge. Commercial work, you can charge a bit more, but it's testing the market, knowing the market. So one of my tricks of the trade each year would be, I had a site, a friend who was a estate manager on a site, and every year he would ring round my 6 competitors, get a price off them, and those would land on my desk, and I could compare the market and see where I was. And it's you could say it's cheating. I call it market research, basically. But I knew where every one of my competitors' businesses was for hedge cutting, how much, so you could roughly work out their hourly rate from that, how much per square metre they were charging for grass cutting. And sometimes I would sit and think, I need to increase my prices, or sometimes I would sit and think, well, we're not far away here.
For anybody watching this that is maybe doing domestic and they're looking to get into gardening, or they're looking to get into the commercial, what sort of tips would you give somebody that wants to take the next step and go to commercial work?
I think you've got to realise that you can't get through into commercial with a 21-inch mower. And basically, once someone invests in me on a site, they're like a family member. I will go out of my way for them. And I've seen guys try to get into commercial with small equipment, and then they drop someone in the lurch halfway through the year. And it's like, you can't do that. You're in an agreement there. And I think it's equipment. You can't just... You need a basic bit of equipment, a decent ride on and things like that. So
you need tools that aren't going to let you down.
You need tools, yeah. But you also don't need, in the commercial land, you also don't need one set of tools, you need two. So, for instance, if I've got a big football field to maintain for a customer and I'm cutting that with a Ransoms Parkway, which is now a £50,000 machine if you buy it new, yes, you can get away with. If that goes down, they've got a match tomorrow and I'm halfway through. What do? They want the grass cut. I'm letting them down. I need to be able to go back to my unit and pull out a 48-inch mower. It's not the same mower, but it will do that job. It satisfies the customer. It satisfies me that I've achieved what I need to. But if that machine was my only machine and that goes down and there's nobody else to help, there's no hire shops, this could be 5 o'clock on a Friday night, what do? You've let that customer down, and customer service is a big thing for me. And I don't think a lot of people in this industry don't value customer service. The business needs to downsize because for the last, I would say, 5, 6, 7 years of working sort of round the clock and working 80, 90 hours a week, it's the impact it's had on everything else. As I explained, when I built my business, I had a son on the way, and I would honestly say that my business has sort of been very close to ending my marriage over the years, because
working for yourself
is
really tight.
What people don't realise is that business has to come before everything. That business it's not more important than your family, but it tends to mould that way. So that was the first thing on my mind.
Most people don't appreciate that. Don't work for themselves.
Yeah,
how much time it takes, and
the time and everything, and like I say, my wife shouldered everything really with the business. I'm
going to even say a wee bit of behind the scenes. So we filmed a lot of the first episodes in January. We published at the end of January. Well, nearly at the end of January. I was actually away on holidays whenever we published, and I had a lot of stuff scheduled, ready to go, but it was really stressful. I didn't get time to think about my holiday beforehand. My wife had to plan everything, and then the videos were going live as I was lying on the beach sipping my pina colada. But it was really it was,
oh dear me,
oh dear me, what a hard life. But you don't expect to be lying in a beach working.
No,
most people don't. Most people don't think of. I'd love to get this stage where I could line up each all the time.
The business just runs itself.
I think in this business, if you try to achieve an 8 to 4 lifestyle or a 9 to 5 lifestyle, you ain't gonna have a business. It's a 24 hours a day, 7 days a week business that from waking up on a morning, it's the first thing you think about.
You said at the high point you had 7 employees, and then you've decided the downside because of the less stress. How have you gone about that? How have you managed that?
A couple of guys left over the years, and the guys that were still on board obviously stayed and worked more hours, and I would do more hours just to keep the money coming in, to keep the jobs covered. But I think 4 or 5 years ago, it got to the point where I thought I need to slim this down even more, because it's just not what I thought it would be. The stress and everything, and like you say, you've got someone working for you 8 hours a day. You're getting probably, after the load the van up on a morning and travel to a site which you've got to pay for. Same again when I worked for my old company years ago.
Unbillable hours.
It was you got paid from on the job. That's against the law now. Basically, you unbillable hours, so you're probably getting 5 hours a day out of somebody on site. Those 5 hours has got to achieve quite a lot of money just to pay their wages alone, the way the government keep ramping up wages and things.
Pensions
added to
Pensions,
it. Pensions weren't a thing in years gone by.
Sick pay as well. If an employee's sick,
if you do
you
the
have
sick.
to, yeah.
PPE, you've got to kit them out with PPE. The bottom figure, once you sit and you take an employee on that bottom figure, if you're paying them £20,000, by the time you factor in the holidays, that's just as a rough example,
Yep.
the holidays, like you say, the sick pay, the PPE, the bits of training they need, you need to be making close to sort of £26,000 before they even make you one penny.
And you're not including pay. You do the payroll, so again,
and then
payroll will be extra, insurance.
And then you've got to multiply that by the 4 or 5 people you've got on board. And the bottom figure at the start of the year, the bottom figure once you add all your overheads up before you even turn a profit, is staggering once you have employees. Including insurances and your fuel bill, which you can pretty much figure out for the year and everything in advance. And it was just getting to the point where I wasn't sort of enjoying it, and I was on a mower most of the day, and I wanted to get back to what I enjoyed, which was gardening. It was getting to the point where it was making you unhappy. It was the decision that, right, I'm going to go down to, at the start of last year, I'm going to go down to 2 employees. And one of my guys picked up a bit of a injury, not through work, but he developed arthritis. Halfway through last year, I'd shrunk my workload slightly, but I was covering because he wasn't doing as much as he could have done. It got halfway through last year and I explained to the wife I'm going to have to work more to cover, but that's it. The business is going down to me and one part-time person who can cover holidays and stuff this coming year, and that's as of the end of 2023. That's where we stand at the moment. I have a young girl, which is a bit strange for the industry. She does litter picking for the business, and she does weeding and flower beds and things, and she is part-time, and apart from that, it's just me.
And if you were your younger self, what advice would you give your younger self if you were to do it all again, or if somebody came along to you and said, Scott, I want to be you, I want to start my own commercial work, what advice would you give them? One
bit of advice would be to be more ruthless, because I've been too nice to people over the years in the business, and they haven't passed that back on. Been too nice with wages, been too nice with hours, and just take the van home and things like that, and they haven't valued that. So I would say need to be more ruthless, treating people as a family in a business, which I thought was the ideal scenario, hasn't worked for me. It could work for people. I'm not saying it's not going to work for everybody, but it hasn't worked for me. I just felt at times people were sort of taking a lend of you. So that would be one big bit of advice. Just keep on top of everything in the business. Just remember that they're an employee and you're the owner.
If you're enjoying this podcast, don't forget to smash the like button. This podcast not only goes out on YouTube, you might be listening to this on the other normal podcast channels such as Amazon, Spotify, or Apple Music. If you think anybody, any family or friends would find this podcast useful, make sure to send it to them via text or email, and don't forget to rate us on any of those channels. Be really, really welcome.
Scott, with running your own business, do you want to tell us some of the highs and lows that come with that?
Coming out of money initially, the lows are, as I said previous, living on fresh air and being at breaking points sometimes when you don't have money. The highs are when the business is established, and although I'm downsizing staff members, I couldn't have got where I was without staff. And the business has been really lucky to me in the fact that it's paid off my mortgage. It's allowed me to buy nice vehicles for a personal point of view. It's paid for holidays. It's paid for house renovations and things like that. So it's been really good in that sense, although the stress probably outweighs the good things at times.
You run a YouTube channel. Do you want to tell us a wee bit about your YouTube channel?
Yeah, I started watching YouTube 4 or 5 years ago. I think I'd been to Saltex and I was chatting to a couple of guys who did YouTube, went home, started watching a few videos and thought, I could give it a try. So I did a few grass cutting videos and was quite surprised. I thought if I could get 100 people watching these videos, it would be great. And within a matter of months, I was getting sort of 500 people watching it. So I thought to myself, how can I sort of benefit people watching these videos, and how can I increase me following it slightly? So I started doing business tips and offering advice, and quickly I was getting phone calls, I was getting emails from people who were looking to establish businesses. So I kept the reviews of tools going, and I kept the business tips going of how to build the business. So a lot of the stuff we've talked about today are in some of those older videos. And I think from a pride point of view, there's 4 or 5 people I sort of speak to on a regular basis at the moment who have built quite good businesses, who will openly come out and they've commented on my videos to say that they've built the businesses from.
You talk about a lot of really good business tips. If you want to grow your business and you're interested in hearing especially about the commercial sector,
Yeah,
your videos are really good, and the information you give away is, I'd say, priceless. Some of the stuff you talk about.
Yeah, what I saw was there was only 1 or 2 guys doing commercial videos, and what I thought was the ones who were doing commercial videos didn't really have a commercial background. They were still people who just come into the industry, and I didn't think the advice was great. So it was a bit of a niche, and the channel sort of grew to a point. I think it's just over 2,000 people now subscribed to the channel. The downside was it got to the point where I was receiving too many phone calls for offering the advice. So I had to actually end that, and I had to actually say to the new people, I can't keep giving the advice, but the videos are there to watch, which is the best form. And I just keep a small amount of people now who I still deal with on a daily basis or weekly basis, who I still offer advice to on price, and that could be anything to do with a business or they're having a bit of a problem. I'll still help them out.
No problem. Well, listen, Scott, where have you travelled from today?
We have travelled via airplane from Shildon in County Durham up to Newcastle and then across to Belfast.
Well, thank you very much for coming over and coming to us on the podcast.
Yes, it's been a pleasure.
Good man.
Thanks very much,
Nice.
guys.